Okay.
You
I don't, what I'm saying is I'm not gonna have access to your cloud. So you're gonna have to send it.
I'll
to
make
me.
it work for you. Don't worry.
Okay, so good evening, everyone. This is the regular meeting of the ANC 34G Racial and Social Equity Standing Committee. Thank you, community members, for attending. I know Peter Lynch, I've known Peter for a while. He's also running for one of the ANC seats. We also have, as a community member in attendance, Jansen Martin. Or I'm sorry, Mary Lee Jansen. Did I say that right, Mary Lee?
Yes.
Good, okay. And then we have Ferial Bishop. So definitely happy to have those 2 or 3 community members on board. And Mary Lee, what single member district do you live in?
I live in Barnaby Woods. What single member district is that?
It depends. If your commissioner is me, it's 3G01. If
You,
it's Michael,
It's
okay.
you. Yeah.
Then I know Ferial lives in 3G01 as well. Who's joining? That's EE. Someone just joined with the initials EE. Can you introduce yourself? Okay. So everyone should have the agenda, hopefully committee members, community members. If you're joining us for the first time, we have quite a full agenda. If you want to comment, feel free to comment on the agenda section. If you have any more substantial comments.
Oh, it's so big. Stick it in, Daddy. Oh.
That was from Peter's mic. He's muted himself.
Oh, I'm sorry. That was Peter's baby. Awesome. Okay. There's a 7:50 portion of the agenda where it's open to all.
Lisa, you're so hot.
So that's not from Peter's mic.
No.
Well, not, but there's nobody else on the
Yeah,
call.
folks, to be clear, that's not me.
No, but there's weird. It's weird if there were 2 up until then. There were 2 Peter Lynches on the screen. Now there's just 1.
Yeah,
No,
I don't know. This is me, Peter Lynch. I don't know what the other one was.
Now it says Randy Speck. Of course, that's not me either.
Okay, I'm gonna kill that one.
Yeah. You got it?
I'm gonna turn the waiting room on, so we.
Yes, I was going to say, do not let anybody else in.
Exactly.
Because-
Yeah. Okay, you got that going, Cal?
Yep, we're happening.
Okay. Does any committee member have any changes or additions to the agenda? That was passed out? Okay. And we do have a quorum being co-chair +1. So we have a co-chair plus quite a few. We don't have any community presentations tonight. We don't really need to approve minutes. I see on here we have approval of the August 30th and July 19th race minutes. Libby gave an overview of those 2 meetings at the last ANC meeting, so we're okay with that. This is going to go pretty quick. Zoning Commission hearing on racial equity. I was not able to attend, so I don't know if any other the committee members here were able to attend that. As well as the Friendship Place anti-racism training. Was anybody able to attend any of those 2 events?
First of all, yeah, I attended the one, the Friendship Place event. It was excellent. I can tell you a tad about it if you'd like. And then I thought that the zoning racial equity meeting was this coming Thursday at 4 o'clock.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. So did I.
Okay.
So you can register.
You want to discuss that just a little bit so people know what that is? The comprehensive plan has a equity component, I guess, if you want to call it, where it's supposed to look at equity in terms of our zoning processes across the city. They're having a public meeting this Thursday at 4. That is the perfect thing for our committee to attend. If you feel like you want to, if you have time to do it, I'm definitely going to try to make that meeting, because I've, voiced some opinions on that process, and just in terms of transparency and knowing exactly what that means. So I have a personal interest in that. I think it's going to be really great. As you might know, the comprehensive plan that was previously passed, I think the equity component, and Randy, please correct me if I'm wrong, is the first time that it's been addendum to the comprehensive plan. So they're giving the community an opportunity to speak out and discuss, issues. I think it's testimony. So people have probably submitted testimony with our Chevy Chase small area plan going on. You hear a lot of people talk about equity. This is where the rubber meets the road. So I would really highly encourage members to participate in that. And, I don't know if it's probably too late to weigh in if it's testimony, because usually that's due a little bit in advance, but it's something maybe that this group, if you like what you hear, if you don't like what you hear, if there's members of the, greater community that bring up issues that we might want to address or tackle, we could have a broader discussion of it. So I just think it would be a really great opportunity for people to kind of get more up to speed on that equity portion of the comprehensive plan.
I'd add to that, Lisa, that
Yes.
this is an addendum to the recent amendments that were passed for the comprehensive plan, but the whole comprehensive plan gets rewritten by law in 2 years. I think 2025, if I remember correctly, and this component will be central to that rewrite. So to get involved in that discussion now, and to understand what the tools are to make it all happen, I think would be very important for all of us moving forward.
Perfect. Okay. Any other questions on that, folks?
Maria has her hand up.
Yes,
Okay.
Lisa, is this a virtual or is this something you have to go to?
I think it's virtual.
Okay. So
Yep.
can you send some information, or someone send some information?
Ron, do you have a link by any chance?
I don't.
I'll
I
try to
probably
have
do. I'll
I-
send something out. I can't put my finger on it right now.
Do
It's
you
on
have
my
See if I have
calendar.
it,
Libby,
because
can
I
you
believe I
post it in the
registered.
chat? Can you post it in the chat? Thanks.
if I can find it. Yep.
Thank you. Libby, you want to give an update on the Friendship Place anti-racism training?
Sure. It was excellent. They had 2 speakers, and what was interesting is both speakers were quite different. The first was a gentleman from Africa who had a very professorial type of presentation, but it was super interesting because he talked about the history behind the whole lie behind racism, and he talked from he talked from a philosophical standpoint. He went back a bit to the 9th century and talked about, misconceptions that have been just used to dehumanize other races. And he was good. And then the woman after him, Chandra Dawson, is a social worker, and she was fantastic too. She talked about racism from the macro level, how people experience it from a macro level, from a micro level, some microaggressions and stereotypes and bias. And then she talked about it, how it affects people on an individualized level. And what I found very interesting is that she said, that everybody should probably come up with their own definition in a way of racism, because we all experience, because especially people of color experience it differently and personally, and it's based on the time in their lives when they experience it, whether it's as a child, a teen, or an adult. And that those are very, very powerful things that form your definition.
Yeah.
So their next workshop is going to be same Friendship Place presenters, and they'll have another speaker, and that will be Wednesday, the 28th at from 12 to 1:30. And I can forward the information about that.
What's the date on that, Libby?
Wednesday, the 28th of September.
Great.
Yeah. And what was interesting too is the gentleman who spoke first, who was the PhD, he started off by giving two stories that really marked him and as a child and as an adult. And those stories he led with afterwards, and it's very, very powerful.
Got it. Great overview. Does anybody have any questions on that particular training? All right.
Yeah, Libby, do you know if there's a recording?
I bet there is. And I'm sure they would be happy to share it, because I've already exchanged an email with their supposedly the vice president of Friendship Place, and they seem very responsive. So I'll find out.
Yeah, I think there is a recording, Libby. I think they sent it out.
Oh, great.
And one more question, what exactly is Friendship Place?
Oh, good question.
It's isn't it a shelter? It's a organization that works to help homeless men, I believe, but they do a lot of anti-racism work as well.
I thought, was it a battered women's? I thought it was a shelter for women and kids. I could be wrong.
I don't
Well, I
think
know
this,
there's House of Ruth is for women. It's over on Wisconsin.
Yeah, I think it's right behind Second District.
mm,
Is that the one, Randy? Or is
no, no, it's
No,
up at
it's in
Tinley,
Kenley.
up Tinley,
It's across from Steak and Egg.
right.
Right.
It provides a lot of different services, and it's connected to a healthcare. Yeah.
okay?
And they do a really terrific job, particularly, I think, of placing people in housing, actually getting them into housing and working with them then while they're in an affordable housing situation. So they've done some wonderful, wonderful work.
Great. And Libby, this was virtual too, right?
Yes.
The ANC, by the way, has given several grants to Friendship Place.
And Corinthia just placed the link in the chat if people want to look at their website and the great work they do. Awesome. Okay. Anything else on that one? Okay. So next thing, I just wanted to give a brief debrief of the last ANC meeting, which I think is a good thing to do, especially when race presents. That way the members that are not here can kind of hear what happened. I can give you my feedback. Randy can give you his feedback. You guys can give us your feedback. And then anybody in the community can obviously provide feedback too. But what we did with this particular meeting, and I've asked, the group before to kind of designate a member of the committee outside of me and Randy to actually do the presentation for the upcoming ANC meeting. That kind of frees us up, but it also gives the community opportunities to learn who other members of race are. It gives you guys opportunity to speak on behalf of the group and present what the group is working on, which I think is a win-win. But Libby did the community report or the committee report, which was basically a summary of the last two meetings that we had. She provided the community with our upcoming meeting, which is tonight. And she, highlighted some of the major things that you guys had discussed, like the call boxes. Let's see, what am I leaving off, Libby? You did
Well, we talked about, I named it as an agenda item, the historic preservation designation issue, but we didn't actually have time to cover it.
Okay,
But because of that, various groups got in touch with me afterwards who are very much aligned with being against historic preservation designation.
do you want to talk about that right now?
Sure, I believe I sent an email to
Did
to our group. It's a group called Living Chevy Chase, who is working very hard and has a lot of really great history about how the historic preservation campaign took place once before. I'm sure Randy, you remember exactly when this was, but apparently it did not go through. And now that there is another campaign underway, this group has really increased their efforts and membership to come out publicly against that. And they have a great list of resources to read about on their website. There are 2 founders and a lot of active members, Greg Schmidt and Jim. His name
Feldman.
starts with an F, which I can't recall
Feldman.
right now. What? Feldman, yeah.
Jim
Ron,
Feldman.
they know Ron, they know Carl, and they're just very concerned that the designation would harm Chevy Chase in terms of its affordable housing prospects, racial equity prospects, and also could just be an obstruction in general to freedom for folks to have their homes more flexible for the way they want to make changes in the future or not. And they point out that there's 2 designations that are often tried to use for historic preservation. One being, I think, the historic component, where you say there's, these very important aspects of our history that need to be reflected. And then also various architectural masters, I believe, who left their print on Chevy Chase. And so they will most likely try to focus on one of those 2 aspects. It's not like as one person wrote in on the listserv. It's not as if Alexander Graham Bell, is making his inventions in Chevy Chase. So we need to, I think, Ron, you probably have more background in addition, but they came up to me to speak about this. And at the Chevy Chase Day, one of the strong proponents for historic preservation wanted to talk as well. And so, both conversations are very interesting.
Great. Okay. And I know we got to probably discuss how to tackle that.
Right. I think there needs to be this partnering and strategy to talk about.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are a bunch of issues, some of which hit upon concerns of this committee. A factoid is that historic districts in a city which is was recently majority Black, historic districts are 70% white. So it raises the question of whether they're being used to promoting exclusion or not. I'm not saying they necessarily are, but it is a fact to take into account.
Mhm. Randy? I'm sorry. Go on.
Yeah.
Ron, when I finish.
Well, I was just going to say, and the other thing is that there's a assumption that one of the unspoken aspects of the move for the historic district is to undermine the small area plan and the construction of some modest apartment buildings on Connecticut Avenue, which of course reduces the capacity of the neighborhood to host affordable, all housing, but in particular affordable housing. So it's a complicated issue.
Right. Randy?
Yeah, and Ron knows more about this than I do, but I know in Cleveland Park, they've done a really good study of the history of historic districts and their effect on future integration of neighborhoods. And in fact, neighborhoods have become less diverse rather than more diverse after they've had historic designations. And I think we could do some things that are similar to what they did in Cleveland Park that could be very insightful, I think. The other thing that would be valuable, I think, and I know some of this work has been done, and I think there was a presentation actually to our committee some time ago about the restrictive covenants and how, and there's been a lot of work done to identify particular properties that have had restrictive covenants. I think it would be very useful in analyzing the question of historic designations to look back at that and say, okay, how many of the houses in our neighborhood who would be designated historic, in fact, were restricted in terms of who could live there. And I think that's not the kind of thing that we want to perpetuate or recognize as being historic in some fashion. It's exactly the opposite, in fact.
Yeah, and one of the things that Jim and Greg have focused on in what they're writing is that, because they're lawyers, is that the ultimate decision in a historic district falls to the Historic Preservation Review Board. And the Historic Preservation Review Board, it's the ultimate decision on a building permit. And the Historic Preservation Review Board is prohibited by their own enabling legislation and regulations from taking into account anything other than the historic, architectural, and other historic aspects of a project. So they are unable to do something like say, I'm going to bend the rules because I want more affordable housing, or I'm going to bend the rules because there's an energy crisis or whatever. They're not allowed to do that, which is potentially problematic.
Yeah.
But if we look at the history, I think just looking at the history, I think we can make a pretty good case that this is not the kind of thing you want to recognize as being historic.
Libby?
If I may,
Yeah.
I'll tell a little story
Mhm.
that as some of you know, I'm an evil developer, and I bought a church, a really nondescript little church that had been built in the 1940s or something in Capitol Hill in order to tear it down and build some good-looking townhouses. And the neighbors, of course, didn't want me to do that because they didn't like change, and they did a historic. They went before Historic Preservation Review Board, asserting that this was an historic building because it housed a white supremacist spinoff of a congregation that was forced to integrate, and so the white folks had their own congregation, and which was housed in this building. And HPRB looked at him and they said, "Do you realize this is the District of Columbia? What are you talking about?
What century are you in?"
Yeah.
Really. Sorry to take your time, but
No, I appreciate that story. Libby?
Just a quick comment about what Randy was saying about the racial covenants. I know that that's exactly one of the things that Living Chevy Chase is working on. They're just encouraging people, their own members and anyone else who wants to do the same, to find out if their own home was built along the lines of a racial covenant. And that information is helpful in proving what we want to say, which is this is not the kind of history that we want to be recognizing.
Right.
And I'm not quite sure of the best way to go about finding those things out, the research part. But I believe Carl knows. And rather than just going down to the DC archives, which sounds like a nightmare, I'm sure there's a way to do it.
It's all electronic, but as I recall, we did have a presentation on this, and they've done a lot of the work already in our neighborhood, and we ought to put them. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to retrieve that information now as to who it was who made the presentation, and but we don't need to duplicate that work. I think a lot of it's already been done.
Yeah. Cal, then Peter?
Yeah, so yeah, it'd be nice to know where to do this, because my parents, who were still in the same house on Nevada Avenue in 1961, my dad scratched out the phrase that said "may not sell to Negroes," and before he signed his lease and initialed it. So
Wow.
yeah,
Awesome.
That's history. That's great. You should frame that. Do you have it?
I'll see if we can find it. We're looking for old papers right now.
I love that. Great. Okay.
Keep in mind that Jews were not allowed to buy in Spring Valley at that point, so they were excluded from buying there. They ended up.
Yeah.
So the covenants in our area covered everything, including Chinese. So it was very comprehensive.
Wow. Yeah, I would like to see, I don't know if anyone has data on there when historic preservation applications are submitted in comparison with proposed development. Because I know the historic preservation, well, I know it's come up before, but then it came up again, at the onset of the Chevy Chase SAP. I would love to see just, citywide, the time frame between, when proposed development is supposed to occur or starts coming up, and then we see those historic preservation review board instances come up. I think timing is very telling sometimes.
Can I add something to what I said? On Sunday, I was taking out for a walk, and I happened to turn onto Newland Street off of 27th in Utah. And in front of the second house was a Black man who turned out to be from Rwanda, who lived in the neighborhood for a while. And I asked him if he knew anything about the name of his street. And then his neighbor came from across the street, who's Jewish. And they started talking about how that edge of Chevy Chase was where the Blacks and the Jews were allowed to be, because it was far enough away from the central core of the neighborhood.
Yep.
Mrs. Newland lived right there, though. And they had a house there. It was really after the senator died. But, and then that park there, Little Forest Park, was their property that they gave to the district, which is ultimately now gone to the National Park Service.
And by the way, the folks on the street were kind of lukewarm about the idea of that they want their street name changed.
Right.
I said, well, if that happens, he said, but you're the folks who would do it, because I talked about us. And I said, yeah, but we can't initiate that. If you want it, you have to say you want it. And they just seem to be kind of, well, we don't know if we really want it. We kind of like new lands, which is how they were seeing it.
Oh.
That's actually in my single member district, and I have talked to people, and there was not an interest in changing the name.
Yeah. Peter?
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. As I talk to more and more neighbors, the historic district is certainly on a lot of people's minds. And I wanted to go back to something Ron and Randy said. I was hoping you two could clarify the connection between what the historic district advocates are trying to do and how that connects with past covenants, which I'm sure now are illegal. And then my second question would be, does Ray's, are you all making efforts to address the people that were ousted from Lafayette and Fort Reno in terms of possibly attracting people that were impacted by that back to Fort Reno or back to the Lafayette area
You
in
mean
some
Brenner-
way?
Brenner family for Lafayette? Is that what you mean?
Yes, and I know the the plaque went up and the name changed, but then also Fort Reno as well, because there's
Right.
quite a history there. But my first question, what's the connection between what the historical advocates and the covenants that you two are drawing? If you guys could elaborate on that, I would appreciate it.
Well, if you're going to have an historic district and you're going to recognize it because it has some historic value, you've got to look at the whole picture. And the whole picture was, this was a white enclave. And is that the kind of thing that we want to
Emphasize. Yeah.
memorialize and protect for all time and keep it exactly the way it was? I don't think so. I think that's antithetical really to what we want to do today.
Randy and Ron, do you get the sense that that is what the people that advocate for the historic district are trying to do?
No, I'm not going to ascribe that kind of motives to them, but I think that is the effect. Certainly, it has been the effect all across the city and in other areas too. And so, I mean, we've just got to think about what the consequences are going to be of doing this.
Okay.
So
That's what
I would frame it ever so slightly differently, that I think that the motivation on the part of the advocates for the district is to not change, to not have change in the neighborhood. And the kind of change that the neighborhood might be looking at is a change from an exclusive white enclave to something else. And that, and we shouldn't memorialize that that past, and by denying the ability of the neighborhood to evolve some. I mean, that's sort of how I would frame it.
Thank you, Ron and Randy, for explaining yourself there. I appreciate that.
And Peter, that's, I think the beauty of this group. We really in the beginning have done a lot of work to try to look at things from a racial equity lens. And that, sort of bypasses some of those, why you're doing this and what your motivations are. And it really hones in on the end result. So that sometimes can be hard because a lot of these issues are, like Ron said in the beginning, extremely complex. Everybody has their own side and their own view. We try to get past that and look at what's the impact from a racial and social equity standpoint.
Sure. Thanks, y'all.
I think, Peter, I mean, just to add one more thing to that, and a lot of it is optics and the politics of optics in the city, and we as a community have made great strides just by having this committee. Yeah. This committee alone was its creation was impactful across the city in terms of how we relate to other to the agencies, to other residents of the city, and so the optics matter, and I'd hate to see us do something that seemed to be turning back the clock on progress we've made.
And you feel a historic district would be that?
Thank you so much. Thank you all for being here today. This is the first.
Thanks.
Peter, was that echo on your end?
No, but
think
I,
that might
I
be-
appreciate you all responding to those questions. It's helpful. Thank you.
Absolutely.
In here, you know, this is a
Sorry.
topic that, you know, certainly has people, you know, many people have.
Where is
Yeah,
that?
Libby, she was trying to play the recording of that session.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
So I think we definitely have to kind of maybe come back to this, maybe do you think maybe a broader discussion and strategy plan in October? We could definitely also have some presentations. I know Cleveland Park would love to probably present to this group, to let us, you know, in on what they did. How do you guys feel about that? But start like really digging into it in October.
I think that's a good idea.
Okay.
I agree.
one of the last meetings we had too, we said, you know, it really wasn't quite right for us to actually start taking a position, because there's not, as far as I know, there's still not actually been a filing for a historic district at the Historic Preservation Review Board. So I think it's still a little bit up in the air as to exactly what it's going to entail and what they're going to use for support and those kinds of things. So I think we sort of need to see what the actual request is. And then I think this committee really needs to take a strong view on it. Cal?
Yeah, I think once Carl gets back in about 5 days, because he gets information about this sometimes, so hopefully maybe he'll update us.
Okay, any other questions on that topic? All right. The other thing that we discussed at the last ANC meeting was the situation involving Mara. And you know, just to keep that short, I don't want to rehash everything that was said and discussed. The tape is, as I say, speaks for itself. But the purpose of that conversation was just to kind of give her an opportunity to be heard in terms of why she released the committee's recommendations to the city council in her written testimony. I can tell you the commissioners did not, some of the commissioners felt very strongly about that. I think there definitely might have been some confusion there in terms of what the commission or some of the commissioners feel versus maybe what's in bylaws versus what's in just standard SOP protocol with the committee. But you know, what I heard from some of the commissioners was that they did not feel those recommendations were releasable. They almost felt like it was still a commission product because we had not acted on it. So there's definitely, you know, we're rethinking how we do our recommendations as a commission. When you guys make recommendations to us, we need to respond. And I'll go over the call box recommendation shortly, but we need to, and you know, Cal sent me an email earlier today, which I thought was very good in summing up a lot of just the protocol of the committee. You guys that attend regularly, you have a protocol, you have procedures, you know how you work. When you have new people coming in that maybe don't attend regularly, it gets, you know, maybe a little slippery because maybe there's different set of expectations. On the recommendations part, from the ANC standpoint, I think we do have to firm that up so that when you submit something, like I want to be able to give you an official document back, and it really shouldn't be any other way. So for example, Maria put together the call box recommendation. We discussed it, we had conversation on it. The committee should get something official back from the ANC saying, this is what we did. We didn't really, I don't know if we resolved anything with Mara. That was a very disheartening conversation for me. I hope people are on this committee to support the ANC. We need people in the community to support us. We get bashed, beat around, the emails, the phone calls. I mean, you know, we're volunteers and we're doing the best we can with the resources that we have, which is very, very limited. But we need committee members that have the community's interest in best heart, have our committee, you know, marching orders, what we stand for in the best of heart, and really, you know, work with all of us. We've had plenty of disagreements on this committee. I think everyone has pretty much been, you know, professional. I hope we continue to treat each other that way. We can continue to have disagreements and then, you know, work them out. I've always been a, you know, communication person. I like to do things, you know, either in phone. I don't like doing a whole lot of heavy communication on email because that just never works. So hopefully we continue to act that way. And I know you guys will, because you guys have been awesome. So I don't know if we resolved anything with Mara, but we're going to do the best we can. And so I'll kind of segue, and I know some of you guys got your hands up. I'm just going to kind of combine these topics. So just to segue kind of into the administrative things that I think, you know, we need to make sure that we have together in terms of ANC is our agenda, which we did get that out. And I think you guys know you're just as busy as we are with our lives. So hopefully we don't beat each other up if we miss some of these things, because it's hard to get all of this done and your work life, your professional life, and, you know, get these things done on the timeline sometimes that we set for ourselves. Sometimes that's possible and sometimes it's not. But just to let you guys know, by our ANC bylaws, the agenda is supposed to be published for our meeting 7 days in advance. So that way, you know, like right now we have 3 community members on here. They have an opportunity to see what we're going to talk about and decide to join. We've slipped a little bit in that, but we got back on track with September. And I'm pretty confident we'll stay on track going forward. Definitely, Corinthia, it was so helpful for you to start that agenda and piece it together. Thank you so very much. I would encourage, you know, Cal, if you want to discuss how that agenda is, you know, formalized. I think the facilitators and the chair soliciting pretty much just what we did on the email chain, giving everybody an opportunity to chime in on what the agenda is a great way to continue to do that. Meeting recording. So we're recording this meeting tonight. We'll try to do that every time. We definitely ran into, in the beginning of the formation of the group, trouble with getting the link to work on YouTube. It was just, and I'm not a technical person, so I struggled with that. But hopefully, Cal, between your link and Peter Gosselin, we'll get this up on YouTube timely. And I think that will prevent us, like I was telling Libby, from doing all the extensive minutes. I'm really comfortable if we have one or the other. I don't think we need both, but if we could just pop this meeting up on our YouTube channel, I think that is about as transparent as you can get. And then I talked about the resolute recommendations that you guys give us, and in terms of us, in terms of the ANC providing something back. Now, in terms of those recommendations, and we can have a broader discussion about that, I can tell you the ANC is not comfortable with having those recommendations out there in the general public without being able to respond to them. And we are supposed to, by bylaws, respond to your recommendations. So that way, when it is put public facing, you have your recommendations and the ANC comments. And I think that's really a fair way to do that. So that's kind of the combination of, you know, that discussion regarding Mora and just us being a little bit more on point with some of the administrative things that we could do to be more transparent in the community. So in terms of the recommendations, before I turn it over to, I think Maurice was first, I'm not sure, Maurice and Cal. You guys gave us recommendations in terms of the call box project. And just to, if you hadn't had a chance to see that, we kind of divided them up into two parts. So one, that Gordon shouldn't be honored in any way, and that the recommendation that the ANC review all designs before artists begin work. Number one recommendation, not to honor Gordon, we felt was a pretty much non-issue. I had talked to Ed Hayes prior to that. Then we got an email, I think, from Commissioner Caldwell. Maybe Carl sent us some stuff. There was a lot of stuff going around, but I had talked with Ed, who is he president, Randy?
Oh, no, he's on the committee that
On a
was
committee, but he's leading that project. Okay.
Right.
And so I had a conversation and I told him, you know, just in full transparency and honesty, what Race was thinking. And he said, absolutely, Gordon was not in the running. It never had been considered. So we felt comfortable on the ANC that we didn't have to like do a whole lot of heavy lifting on that, because Chevy Chase Historic Society or Committee was not going to even bring him up for discussion. And then in terms of the number two recommendation, that we review all designs, the ANC, we kind of flipped this and said that Race can review it. And what the commissioners were kind of thinking about was it's going to be tough for the ANC to like all the art installations that are coming up or proposed coming up in our community to have like a pre-review process. So they kind of felt that if something was coming up, like say the call box project, and we saw something that was offensive or something that as a community we didn't like, the commission felt comfortable with pretty much just what you guys did in this instance, bringing it to the commission for review. So those are, and you know, basically reviewing them on a case by case basis. Right. Those are the two recommendations. We put it forth as a motion, and the motion passed 5-0. So I'll be writing that up. And what I'm also going to do is put our recommendations, once you guys finalize, then it comes to me or us, the committee, ANC finalize, I'll put it up on ANC letterhead, and then the commission vote after that. So we're going to just tweak with that. And, you know, if it doesn't work, how we end up with the, you know, recommendation section, we can, you know, tweak it a little bit more. But I think it's important that we have that on there. Maurice?
Okay, I recognize this meeting is being recorded, so I'm going to make sure that I'm careful with what I say. But first, I want to thank you, Lisa, and you, Randy, as representatives or the co-chair or former co-chairs of this committee, selecting us as volunteers on this committee, nominating us as volunteers of this committee, and the work that you do for the ANC. I just want to comment on Mara's portion of the ANC meeting and just my observations in that I saw her not really answering the question that was asked of her, or really providing a defense. It felt more that she was basically pointing out technicalities and attacking everyone else, and you all listened to her patiently, and you adopted some of her suggestions by saying, yes, we do need to have procedures. We do need to send things out in advance. And so there is some changes that have been made, and I think that's positive. But I haven't heard her look at any of her actions that she's taken only on her own, which she claims is in the nation, which is in the interest of sunshine and transparency, where she posted something on a listserv that was directly about this committee, which we hadn't even formally announced ourselves to the community, let alone that listserv. And then she filed some of the work product just of this committee as part of her own testimony. But she was saying, she was sort of, I think if I understood what she was saying she was filing it because it was sort of like hidden, or the committee neglected to file it, and it was work product that was out there that was like being hidden from the public or something. but neither one of those was her decision to make. And we only work as a committee if we agree to abide by the rules and honor what the committee recommended. And, you know, and so she won't be here till next meeting. She can watch this video. I don't know if she will, and we can have this conversation. But I don't see somebody there who is willing to accept any responsibility and just feel like whatever her intentions are, they're pure enough to justify whatever she does. And I personally don't know how she can be a productive member of this committee moving forward, just given how she's breached everyone's trust, not once, but twice. And I don't think she handled herself all that professionally with all of the commissioners. I think you all showed her a lot more patience than I probably would have if I were in your shoes. So I think that's all I want to say right now, but I'm happy to hear what anyone else has to add. So thank you again, Lisa and Randy.
Thanks, Maurice. Cal?
So I would like to encourage us not to rehash this here tonight, particularly without her. I do think that first of all, I think there's 8 of us who met for a year, with most of us attending most or all of the meetings. So we've gotten to be a fairly tight group in terms of how we are with each other and how we operate, without the necessity for us to have a whole lot of rules and formal protocols. Lisa talked about the need for a reconciliation on the meeting the other night. She led off that item with that, and we don't yet have one. I think the elephant in the room has been that the committee has yet to actually let Maura know why a lot of folks are unhappy with her, why several of the members wanted a reprimand or wanted her to be removed, or both. And I think it's fair for her to hear from us in the next meeting. So that's where I am with this. I think and so to summarize, I think we ought to not have, this is just, like Lisa said, we're a bunch of small volunteers. We're even a smaller group in terms of our energy than the ANC. And, this is not a court where we have to follow a bunch of law and procedure. We just have to follow the few rules that we have in the bylaws, and Lisa outlined them brilliantly in the earlier part of this meeting. So that's where I am. I think we should do this next month.
I agree with that. Are you guys okay with putting that on the agenda for next month, the discussion with Maura?
Yes, I also want to say though that this topic has become something that really, we don't have the time. We have work to do. We don't have the time and the luxury to keep spending on this particular membership issue. It's been disruptive. It's been antagonistic. It's been disrespectful. It has not been in any way productive in terms of us making our goals, working towards our goals. So I think if we talk about it again in the future, let's do it, and then let's move on.
I 100% agree.
I apologize, Libby. Someone came in and talked to me during the last half. Can you just repeat the last bit of what you said?
Let's just not waste our time anymore. I think it's important to address this, like you said, at the next meeting, but we don't have the time and the luxury to focus on this particular membership issue going forward. We've got a lot of other things to do and accomplish.
Yeah, after October, that's it.
I mean, our term is up in 3 months anyway. So, depends on whether she wants to continue with us and why.
Nope, I think we got a game plan on that. And, the one thing though, I do think we have to do is make it very clear. So in the emails going out, so that there's no confusion with Maura, that this topic is coming up for discussion. If she wants to be there, she could be there. And then we'll also have to really put into, going back to Libby's point, some procedures for that discussion, because we can't tolerate the interruptions and, just bad meeting protocol. So if we can have it and people can, be cordial when they speak, I will not accept personal attacks. I'm gonna say that right now, and I'm gonna say it again. Personal attacks are not gonna happen in this group. So we can discuss our business, but we are not going to attack each other. And we'll figure out, I'll work with Randy and Cal on the best way to handle that if it occurs, but I'm hoping it does not occur. Okay, so we're at open discussion. Cal, I don't know if there's anything that you have that you want to facilitate with the group.
I don't
I'm
see
done
any,
with all my stuff.
I don't think there's any point in turning that role over to me this late in the meeting. I'll just do October.
Libby,
But sure, you can open it up to the community.
Well, I wanted to say that I had an interesting conversation at Chevy Chase Day that was concerning to me, and I wanted to get input on it. The Chevy Chase Citizens Association has been, I'm not going to single out who, but it sounds like there's a common belief that it's a myth that Black people would like to live in Chevy Chase. And, I can understand that all communities are, maybe sometimes prefer not to move across town and leave other folks, but I also feel like there's plenty of reasons to want to live in other parts of town, plenty of reasons to want to live in Chevy Chase. And I don't know why it would be considered a myth or something that data could not, apparently there should be data out there to prove this in order for people to be convinced of it. So I'm just interested to know what our group thinks. My response was, I think families want to have good lives for their children, safe streets, green spaces, resources, good schools. What's the problem with, Black people wanting to live in Chevy Chase? It seems like that would be completely understandable. But there's a group that feels that this is a myth.
So Libby, are they saying that Black people don't want to live in Chevy Chase, or?
They don't believe it. And I'm not qualifying the whole Citizens Association with this. I'm just saying, unfortunately, this was pretty prominent.
wow.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know. That makes me laugh. It's so disturbing. And I don't know if that's, and I remember you telling me about the conversation. So you have to take it seriously that, the person that said these comments raised them to you. And Libby, if you tell the whole story, I think they came up to you because you were a member of race, right?
Right. It was a Chevy Chase Day.
Yeah.
It was a very surprising conversation to me, and the person was quite emphatic about it. So I was left with the feeling that in order for the community to believe it, it was important to show data. And I feel like there's a lot of other ways to look at this, and I can just talk to people I know as well.
Hi, this is Renee.
Hey, Renee.
Hi, Renee.
Hi. So why did they make this statement? Do they have data to prove that Black people don't want to live in Chevy Chase, or where Black people want to live, or for that matter, where anyone would like to live? I mean, is there any data out there that says where different people like to live?
They didn't cite any data. It was really, based on, I think, an impression or a belief or a longstanding attitude.
You know, I can't proclaim to have the answers to thinking like that, because that's so out of my realm of thought. And being and I think, kind of like you said, Renee, where does anybody want to live? I mean, any parent wants to put their kid in the best neighborhood that they could put them in. Any parent wants their kid to go to the best school, and especially if you can go there for free. You know, any parent wants their kid to be in safe streets. You know, I don't want my son walking the streets and have to worry about, you know, somebody robbing him or somebody shooting him. So anyone wants the best outcome for their kid. And, you know, I think all of us, when we're looking how to get that outcome, one of the first things we look at is neighborhoods and schools. Those are the first things that we look at. So I don't know, when I hear a comment like that, I sort of think of, I don't think there's anything that we could bring to this person to prove otherwise. That's a stereotype bias that they have, that at some point they have to see that they have it, because it's really kind of, you know, and I don't want to use the word, it begins with an A and ends with nine, but to kind of think that people wouldn't want to bring themselves to a better lot in life. I've told many times on the campaign trail about a good friend, coworker that I had that, you know, was living in a homeless shelter with her 2 kids. And the thing that she wanted to do was move and get them into the Deal feeder pattern. And she actually bought or leased a apartment for a couple of years on Connecticut Avenue to get them there. So she was Black. I mean, there's a whole, and then I think it's an ignorance in terms of, and I've said this a lot, who lives in this community. There are a lot. I mean, I know it's, and I think there's a little kind of, we say 6%ers. We're about 6% of the population. But I mean, if you go along Connecticut Avenue, it looks a lot more diverse today than it did 10 years ago. And those people live there. You know, when I go to the nail salon, and I've joked with Peter Gosselin about that, there's a lot of, you know, Black ladies in the nail salon. There's a lot of Black people that are shopping at that Safeway and carrying their bags down Connecticut Avenue. So I think a lot of this is ignorance, maybe with this person, and bias that maybe they are not observing the community that's simply around them. And asking, you know, themselves that question and recognizing it's a bias. I don't know how we can address that as a committee. I think as the ANC, we've done a great job with elevating some of those voices. You know, when we were doing some of the workshops, we featured folks from Connecticut Avenue that were, you know, very diverse in race. And I think we're doing a good job of trying to promote diversity and letting folks in the community know that we do have a diverse community. Chevy Chase Day was, there's some diversity there. If you guys saw the dancers from the ballet program, it was amazing, beautifully amazing. So there's a lot of diversity. Sometimes people just have to open their eyes. Black people are already here. And I know, like Miss Bishop's, you know, family, my family, you know, we've been here for a long time. So we didn't just move here, we've been here for a while. So I think some people just have to realize that reality.
I think, you know, in the workshop you referred
Sorry, I
to.
had my hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry, Cal, I didn't see that.
He did.
Oh,
So I wanted to say 2 things. One is that in the 10 years between censuses, I believe we've gone from 93% white to 84 here in this area. I'm not sure exactly what that covers. The Black population has increased a little bit during that time. But I'm going to say something that, and so please keep your arrows in your quivers when I say this. When we had the task force and we had the housing committee and we worked on those recommendations, the subcommittee, I brought up the fact that I wondered whether culturally there were Black folks in wards 7 and 8 who would actually want to move here and be in a sea of white faces, given you know, how uncomfortable a lot of Black folks are being in primarily white spaces. So I can see why there could be some Black folks who wouldn't want to live here, even though the schools are better and even though all that stuff, because there are other factors beside that, such as the cultural thing. I just wanted to point that if you want to know how somebody might think that, I'm not saying this person thought that, because I don't know what their prejudices and biases are, but I raised that question a number of times when we were working on the housing recommendations.
I mean, I think there's a lot of people, period, that don't want to maybe be in Chevy Chase. I mean, our city is very diverse. When I came here, I first was in, where was I first? I was by Howard University, so Ward 5. And then after that, I moved to Adams Morgan, and I was like happy as a clam because I was like young, and you know, I love the culture there. And you know, Chevy Chase is kind of a bedroom community where, you know, people are a little older, a little settled down, a little bit more quiet. So I mean, yeah, I mean, I just think that, I mean, we know that not every community is for everybody, but to maybe kind of single it out and say why these Black folks wouldn't want to come here, to me speaks a little differently. Ron?
Several quick points. First point is, gosh, I never see Peter Goslin at the nail salon when I'm there. We have different schedules. But the second, though, is that, you know, when we did those information exchanges, when Connie had the one that focused on the apartment dwellers, you know, she had people on there who were bending over backwards to be in this neighborhood. They were subdividing 1-bedroom apartments into 2 bedrooms in order to keep their kids in this neighborhood. So, you know, I think there is desirability. But the other thing is that I don't know if the metric is necessarily how many Black people end up living in this neighborhood, so much as it is to removing the barriers and creating an environment that promotes diversity. And those changes in demographics are generation timelines. And you know, so you can't really expect a quick change that's quantitative. I think you really have to be playing the long game.
Yeah.
So Libby, do you feel like you got your question answered?
You're on mute, Libby.
You're on mute, mute.
Sorry. Sure. And yes, thanks. I also feel like we've got to keep in mind the folks who work here, post office, grocery store, teachers. There's plenty of reasons why people who work here would like to live here.
Mary Lee?
I have a question. Libby, when the statement was made to you, was it made to you for you to do something or with that statement, or?
It's a good question. I felt like it needed to be, I felt like the person wanted justification.
As to why you are supporting this or why you're advocating for this?
Yep.
Okay.
It was as if it was challenging the notion, and that's fine. But I was surprised, especially considering who it was coming from.
You know, I'm a director of HR, and a lot of times I just listen, and you know, people all over. We really have to check our biases because we all have them. And next time you probably should refer that person. So it's a book called "Did That Just Happen?"
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was a Chevy Chase day.
Yeah, by Stephanie Pender. And sometimes some of the things that come out of people's mouths.
Yeah.
It's just like amazing. And I think that's just one of
Renee, what's the name of the book?
them.
What's the name
Did
of
that just happen?
Could you say it
That's the
again?
name of- Did that,
I'm gonna put in the chat. Did
Okay.
that just
that
happen?
just happen?
Thanks.
Did that just happen?
Okay. Did that just
Thank
happen?
you.
And it's by Stephanie Pender, Pinder. Two psychiatrists wrote it. And it talks about, and it was written since the George Foreman incident. And it talks about how, 2 summers ago, all these corporations were talking about, what they were going to do for their boards and how they were going to put all these people on their boards. None of that has happened. And how companies bring in diversity. They may bring Blacks, or they may bring Asians, they may maybe bring gays or queers in, but then once they have them in, like, what do they do with them? So it starts off with like maybe 6 or 7 of those different disciplines or people being representative, and one by one, like, they just wanted to leave because they just felt so uncomfortable. Or someone in a board meeting and a white man saying something about someone Black, but then point to the Black man and say, but you're not Black, or you're not Black like that person is. Like, okay, like, what's the difference? We're both Black. So it's just surprising, some of the things that people will say and think. And some of it is ignorant, some of it is, not being exposed. Yeah, so it's a good book.
Thank you, Renee.
Uh-huh.
Marilee had her hand raised. Marilee?
Just, I'm not sure I'm allowed to say anything, but I think it's simple racism. I think it reminds me of Southern Jim Crow farm owners thinking that their sharecroppers were happy, and slave owners thinking that, oh, that's the life these people can appreciate. They like being slaves. That's what it reminded me of.
That's
So.
interesting. Mm-hmm. That's very interesting. Yep. Yeah.
It's upsetting.
Yeah. Libby, let me ask you a question. Did you feel like you were armed with enough information to respond appropriately to that comment?
Not when the person wanted data,
Yeah.
not when the person wanted some study from DC. But I felt outraged, and I felt comfortable saying, what you just said about how everyone wants the best things for their children. And, that comes through equality and equity. And, I have, that's what I felt.
Okay.
I was really, shocked.
Yeah, because I'm just thinking like, I don't know what I would have said either in that situation, but maybe we could think of, down the line, maybe a training or presentation, because we're going to get, I think, when especially as we're going through the SAP, the meetings, conversations that are going to occur in the community, maybe we could have someone come in and kind of talk to us about just how to appropriately, address some of those responses and give people the information that we really want to give them without the anger, maybe. It's just a thought. You guys can let me know.
Well, already having a book to recommend is good.
I think so too. I love that. And since they came up to you, I mean, it's up to you. You could even share the link with them. I mean, yeah.
Good point.
I love that. Mm-hmm. Okay, Maurice, then Cal.
I'll be a little quick here, just because I know we're getting late on time here. But Libby, thank you for manning, the Chevy Chase Day, and sorry you had to go through that. What I've found in my experience is people, have an agenda, and they're trying to, elicit an argument And a lot of times, instead of engaging them on level, showing a bit of authentic curiosity about why they feel that way, what prompted them to say that, just try to understand and try to create some other connection and get them to explain, you know, where they're coming from and why they believe that and how they came about to think that way. It sort of disarms them and makes them
Right.
think more about their own position instead of, you know, putting you on the defensive and then you attacking them and trying to put them back on the defensive. So it's just, people don't like to be challenged. People don't like to be called racist, even if they say something blatantly racist. And so you probably did the best thing by not really getting into a heated back and forth with that person, but thank you.
Cal?
About Chevy Chase Day, I do want to say thank you, Corinthia, for giving us a one pager, because that's what we had. And it was great to have something concise. And I really want to say thanks for putting that together.
Thanks to Marie. Okay.
Cal?
So I'll just repeat something else I said 2 years ago when we were doing the housing recommendations on the task force, that, you know, this neighborhood, we have families who have probably inherited property from 100 years ago when all this original shit went down. And I still think it's very deep under the surface in the soil, so to speak, of in certain spots in Chevy Chase. And I think it's there. I just think that, you know, this racism is very deeply ingrained. I don't necessarily know that the people today who inherited that are conscious of it, but it's definitely there. And I think we have, and we talked about how, when we did the housing recommendations, how we were going to get together and talk about how we might, how we would respond exactly to the situation we're talking about today. So I concur that we need to get together and, you know, it's been 2 years and I still haven't done any kind of trainings or workshops yet. And so I will put my thinking cap on and maybe get together with some other folks on this. Yep. I also talked about how members of the committee maybe also ought to go through a training, because no one, it was Renee, I believe, who said, we all have the bias, we all have biases, they may be different. And for someone to act as if they're above that, or that they don't have them, is problematic for us. And I think that's something we can also address. Yep.
Great point.
I do
Go on, Libby.
I do think that when people learn more about the history of Chevy Chase, I do think they are more open to the discussion. I really do think that, you know, we've been talking about the history of Chevy Chase now for 3 years since we formed the task force and did all the research, but not everybody knows about the history, and certainly not some of the interesting details. And that makes things very real, I think. So perhaps that should be something that we work on getting the word out more about.
And I've seen folks who, when they know about the history, just say, that's in the past, we don't need to deal with that. Let's just focus on making everybody equal, you know, sweep it under the rug, that whole whitewashing thing that can happen.
Well, the whole equity versus equality and discussion is always an interesting one to have with people.
Yep.
I need to sign off to put my kids to bed. So
my-
I apologize if we haven't covered everything, but I'll look.
No, we're actually at the end of the agenda.
Okay.
We got a couple things on for the next meeting, but October 18th, I think that's the third Tuesday, 7 p.m. We'll do the same thing, Cal, with the link in the agenda, and we'll have, you know, email circulating to see what we need to add to that agenda based on this meeting. Thank you, community members, for coming. I really, really appreciate it. Hope you guys got to know us a little better, and hope
Thank
to see
you.
again.
Good to see you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
And Cal, how do I save the recording?
Let me turn the recording off first.
It's nice having Marilee.